Today we'll be speaking with Lauren Blackburn with the North Carolina Department of Transportation's Pedestrian and Bicycle Division and Laura Sant with the UNC Highway Safety Research Center. My name is James Gallagher. I'm also at the UNC Highway Safety Research Center, and I will be moderating today's webinar. Good morning, Laura and Lauren.
Hello.
Good morning.
So welcome, everyone. As James mentioned, I'm Laura Sant with UNC's Highway Safety Research Center, and I'm joined by James and Nancy Pullen-Stufert. We have had the pleasure of working with Lauren Blackburn on the Watch For Me program for the last couple of years. And I'm just going to use this time to tell you a little bit about the program, how it came to be, and what results we've seen to date. And then I'll get into some of the details on what you as participants would get out of the program when you apply and what the requirements for participation are. And we'll talk a little bit about the steps to apply, and as James mentioned, we'll have questions and answer time at the end. So the motivation of this program has always been safety. In North Carolina, we see about 2,400 pedestrians hit and 960 bicyclists hit in crashes with vehicles each year. Of those, about 180 are killed. But we also learned from a survey that the Institute for Transportation Research and Education did a few years back. They surveyed 16,000 people and found that 90% of them felt that having a safe pedestrian and bicycle network was really critical to their well-being and quality of life. So we're concerned about safety, and we want to help accommodate people in walking and biking more often throughout the state. So the goals of the Watch For Me program are really to raise awareness of what pedestrian and bicycle safety issues are. A lot of that is through education and high visibility law enforcement and engagement with the public. And ultimately, we're seeking to change behaviors, to promote safer behaviors, and in the long run, prevent those injuries and fatalities from occurring. So when I say that we're looking at changing behaviors, some of the key things that we're looking at improving include driver yielding to pedestrians at crossings and driveways. We're looking for drivers to pass bicyclists in a more safe way. And we're looking to improve the attentiveness of all roadway users. Pedestrians, bicyclists, and drivers at key areas where we know that a lot of conflicts occur. And we want to help promote cyclists and pedestrians to be more visible at night so that they can be seen by cars. And all of these behaviors came up as a result of us analyzing several years of pedestrian and bicycle crash data in many of the cities in North Carolina. So these are the messages that you'll see integrated into the Watch For Me program and the material. So I want to also be very clear about what Watch For Me is and isn't. It's not an anti-jaywalking campaign. It's not intended to be a one-time thing or a media blitz. And it's definitely not just a way to get some cute flyers out the door. We are focusing on a comprehensive program that is led by the partners that are involved from all of these different communities. It's driven by the data that we have about crashes and our knowledge of the crash problems and our knowledge of what's working to solve those problems. We hope that the program is long-term. It may begin in this year, or it may build on things that communities have already been doing in the past, but we want to help sustain and grow the program in the future. And the triangle that you see there is a model that we've been using for the program, a model for crash prevention. And the Watch For Me program aims to address each tier in this triangle. We look at changing individual behaviors through some of the education and enforcement that we do. We look at improving organizational efforts through some of the training that we offer. We promote environmental changes by working with a broad coalition of folks to understand some of the environmental improvements that may be needed and to help coordinate education around those changes. And then ultimately we work through social networks and leverage the media to help see some of those broader societal changes that make pedestrian and bicycle safety the normative behavior. So that's really the foundation for what the Watch For Me strategy is. And you'll learn more about this as as you engage with us over the course of planning for the program delivery. So this also came about from a number of years of research that we've done developing the program. In 2012, we received funding from the U.S. Department of Transportation's National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. We were able to begin a pilot project in some demonstration communities in the Triangle area. In our first year, we focused on safety for pedestrians. But in 2013, we were able to work more with NCDOT to expand the program and include bicycle safety messages that we were testing as well, and work in a broader set of municipalities. We had 10 partners in the Triangle in our second year. And last year was our first year where we went statewide, and we offered participation in the program to any communities that applied. We had 14 municipalities that joined, along with a number of universities that were within those jurisdictions. And we also added an emphasis on safety around schools. Schools are a key partner in this because that's a good way to reach children and parents and caregivers and the broader community about pedestrian and bicycle safety. So here you can see our partners that we had participate in the statewide program last year. I would say about half of these were led by their local police departments, and the other half were typically led by planning agencies in close coordination with the police departments. We did have a few partners that were led by universities that had police departments, and sometimes the university was just part of a broader coalition that was led by the municipal agency. But you can see we did have a reach across all parts of the state, and we had communities as large as, you know, the Triangle region with Raleigh, and we had pretty small rural communities represented as well. And so the Watch For Me program is really scalable to your community, and we, you know, respect the flexibility that you might need in implementing the program. So what we've seen, we were able in the pilot program to collect data at a number of crosswalks in the Triangle community, where we were able to monitor behaviors before and after the Watch For Me activities took place. And what we saw in those first 2 years of the pilot was that driver compliance with yielding laws did improve. In the short term of each year that the program happened, we saw kind of modest gains of 4 to 7% increase in yielding rates at the sites where there was the most enhanced enforcement and education being conducted. From the longer term, from 2012 to 2013, we saw slightly higher gains in drivers complying with yielding laws. And the biggest improvements were definitely at those sites that had the most long-term routine enforcement. Places like Carborough, that's had a program now for several years, are seeing a driver yielding rate of close to 80 to 85%, depending where you are. Other places may be starting at a lower level, but we are seeing some improvements. And we're seeing improvements in pedestrian behaviors as well that we've been measuring, such as use of crosswalks. Last year for the statewide program, we were not able to collect field data, but we are expecting to start doing that again for this program. And eventually, as we have more years of after data, since the program has been in place, we're hoping to do a crash-based evaluation as well to see how the Watch For Me program might be affecting overall crash and fatality rates involving pedestrians and bicyclists. But last year, we were able to talk with the participants and see what other outcomes they could report. And I would say, in general, it was a very positive experience for the partners. Many reported increases in the community awareness of the issues, that their officers had more understanding of pedestrian and bicycle rules and regulations and felt more confident in how they could conduct enforcement. We saw many communities were undertaking changes to their municipal ordinances because they saw that there was opportunities to enhance pedestrian and bicycle safety through some of their policies and ordinances. And almost all of the partners reported that they had stronger relations with their schools and some of the other partners that were working with them on the program at the end. Many also felt that they had stronger relations with their DAs and their court system, and that their traffic violations and citations that they were administering were being upheld quite consistently. And also, as I mentioned, as communities were looking into some of their policies, they were also finding ways to integrate pedestrian and bicycle safety into more of their transportation and community plans. So you can learn more about what the communities did and what they learned from last year if you go to the watchformenc.org site and look for the partner community profiles. But in terms of what participants get back from the program, we are going to be offering a number of materials and media that will help support local outreach, local engagement, education, and law enforcement. So last year, NCDOT spent more than $300,000 on media and materials. I would say about, on average, $20,000 to $30,000 were invested in each community's media market. And these really helped raise awareness about pedestrian and bicycle safety and lay the foundation for the communities that were doing high visibility enforcement and other kinds of education. So that includes radio ads, ads that will be on transit, if transit exists in the community. There's bus ads that are on the inside and outside of the buses. And one reason that we've been targeting advertisements on buses is that when we analyzed crash data and overlaid it with boarding and alighting data from our transit systems, we saw that there was a pretty clear connection with where pedestrian and bicycle crashes were happening in relation to some of these high-use bus routes. So that's been a really important way for us to get some of these safety messages out to the people who need them the most. Where transit service isn't available, we also have other options for getting the word out through advertising. We have ads that we've been placing on billboards as well as at gas stations to target drivers. And we have a number of print materials, including bumper stickers and posters, that we give to the communities to hand out at their local events. And these have been really well received, especially the bike lights that we've been giving out. We've encouraged the law enforcement to hand out bike lights whenever they see a bicyclist biking at night without a light. And this is just a way to do sort of positive reinforcement of some of those behaviors and really engage the community in a more positive way. And here's just a few more pictures you can see of some of the ads that were used last year on billboards and on buses and at some of the gas stations. And additionally, we do give sandwich board signs out and banners that go out to the communities that are participating that they can use during their enforcement events or if they're having community events. And it's really just a way to help reinforce some of the safety messages. Lauren, do you want to add anything about the material and media element?
No, I think you covered it, and you know, of course, there's a little bit more detail to what quantities the different partners would expect to receive. So, you know, if you have questions along those lines, you know, you're welcome to ask.
Right. Yeah, it'll be a slightly different package of materials depending on the needs and size and resources of NCDOT. So in addition to the media materials that you would receive, you'll also receive a number of different technical assistance pieces. One thing that we'll be offering is a one-day law enforcement training for free to all the law enforcement agencies that are part of the program. We come to you with this training as best we can so that we identify a site in the community so that it's not too far of a drive for any police officer to attend. And this is really a good way to give a crash course on pedestrian and bicycle laws and best practices in law enforcement. And we've received a really positive response from the officers who have attended this course. One of the things they say is they were surprised to learn some of the nuances of pedestrian and bicycle laws that they hadn't learned in the academy or in other places, and it was really helpful to help them have a more solid footing for how to go about promoting pedestrian and bicycle safety. We'll also be offering a series of web-based trainings held either monthly or every other month leading up until the program really gets kicked off in the fall. And this will help answer your questions about how to disseminate these messages and materials, how to do enforcement, how to really reach different parts of your community that you may have trouble reaching with education in the past. And this will also be an opportunity to get support from other past participants and learn what they've done to really improve pedestrian and bicycle safety. And then as part of the technical assistance, we'll also be providing some tools and survey materials that can be used to help collect data and help us understand how we're getting the message across and what we may do to improve the program in the future. So as I mentioned, a lot of communities are seeing some improvements, and we do anticipate further improvements in safety outcomes. A lot of communities reported stronger injury prevention partnerships, so I think that's a key benefit to participating in this program. But additionally, if any of you have ever tried to complete an application for a walk or bike-friendly community award, you know that a big part of those applications asks about your involvement in education and enforcement. And so being part of the Watch For Me program is a way to really enhance your applications and maybe seek a higher level of recognition in those programs. Also, the USDOT Office of Secretary has just initiated a Mayor's Challenge for Safer People and Safer Streets. There was a webinar held this week on that effort that some of you may have attended. One of the key elements of the Mayor's Challenge involves education and enforcement, and so this program dovetails really closely with the Mayor's Challenge and could be a way to show your support for that effort as well. And finally, many communities across North Carolina have developed pedestrian and bicycle master plans, and this is a way to help implement your adopted pedestrian and bicycle plan that most likely includes some recommendations for education and enforcement. So it's a way to really synergize with a lot of other things that are probably already happening in your communities, and just to help you take it to the next level with pedestrian and bicycle comprehensive programs. So in terms of requirements, we do require that partners attend or send a representative to all of the SHARE meetings. Those are a really important opportunity for us to convey best practices and ways to be effective in participating, and for us to also learn what others are doing and how we can help brainstorm obstacles. So we require attendance for those, and we require each agency to send officers to the free law enforcement trainings that we work with you to coordinate. The trainings are most likely going to be held as early as mid-June, but more likely in July and possibly even early August. And we coordinate very closely with you to schedule the trainings at a time and location that works best. We don't require a set number of officers to attend, but we do encourage you to send as many people as you can to those, so that they can bring back what they learn and help improve the overall ability of the agency to participate in some of the enforcement efforts. We also certainly require that the materials that we provide are disseminated as best you can, and we provide support in helping identify opportunities to get those materials out. We just don't want to see them sitting on a shelf since it is a valuable commodity. And then we do require law enforcement operations to be part of this. Every community is going to have a different plan. Law enforcement can take on a number of different faces. It can be a high visibility education piece, followed by a warning period, followed by some targeted enforcement at certain high crash locations. And we'll work with you to develop the plan that makes the most sense. But we do want to emphasize that the communities that we're seeing with the highest safety benefits and the highest changes, I guess the highest rate of improvement for safety are the communities that are really investing in high visibility and routine law enforcement. So we think that that's a real key part of a community's participation. And finally, as I mentioned, we are trying to learn more about this program and improve every year, and so we ask that participants help us by providing some data to support that evaluation. We'll be providing some postcards that can be administered at local events, and those postcards will be mailed back to us so that we can collect and analyze that data to see what communities' attitudes and knowledge of the law is and if that's changing over time. So we'll need your help in administering that survey and getting those postcards back to us to evaluate. We will also be asking for you to help submit 4 brief monthly reports to help us track what you're doing and what's working and what's not, and also to report what kind of enforcement activities are being held. And since I mentioned we'll be doing some field data collection this year, in certain communities we may need to work with you a little bit to help identify sites where we will send our team to help collect that data. And finally, every year we do conduct a brief exit interview with each community to really just help us capture what you did and what you learned from the program and what we could do to provide technical assistance in the future. And that was used to help us develop those community profiles, and you'll see that we try to share everything that we learn and where the program is headed on the website. So one other thing I thought would be helpful to understand, oh, did someone want to jump in?
Laura, it's Nancy. I just wanted to clarify about the partner share meetings. Those are conducted over the phone. Those are not in-person meetings that partners need to travel to.
Yes, exactly. Those are going to be web-based using the same GoToWebinar platform. Thank you. So another thing that I would say was not necessarily required but pretty common amongst the partners who participated last year is that almost all of them either had or formed a coalition of partners very early. This is not a program that can be undertaken by one staff member. It really needs to be something where you're engaging with the police department, the Parks and Rec department, planning, sometimes communications and public health. There's a role for a lot of people, and it really depends on the size of your community and the size of activities that you're wanting to take on. Many communities organized a kickoff event. Most of these were typically held in early August, which is sort of the ramp-up period that we have for kicking off the overall statewide program. A lot of these were coordinated as part of National Night Out or back-to-school events. Some of them were bike rodeos. They really can take a different size and shape, but this is a way to help really bring attention to each community's participation in this program. A lot of communities also engaged with the media, either through their kickoff event or by issuing press releases or conducting interviews with the media. And we got dozens of stories covered by radio and TV and print media last year, which we've archived on the website. And this is really an important part of the program because it helps us amplify our message to a broader audience. Also, a lot of the communities reported coordinating with schools, and I think that one of the lessons that we heard was to begin that coordination early on and establish those partners soon, so that if you are hoping to distribute some of your messages or have events with the schools, you have those partners well established. And then finally, most communities were presenting to their city councils. They were working with their elected officials They got a lot of support from their elected officials, and they felt that it was, a really good opportunity to raise some of these issues and examine their policies and plans to improve safety in a more systemic way. And I would say last year we did ask the partners to report on how much time they spent on the program. It varied widely, but the average amount of time spent was about 20 hours a month to be involved in coordinating the campaign, I would say, which really ran from May until October, November. And that was 20 hours a month for the key point person. That doesn't necessarily count the time of all the coalition members that was involved. But I would say, again, this varied pretty heavily. Some of the partners who've been involved for a long time, they're able to spend less time on it because it's a little bit more routine and part of their overall role. Others who were getting started and had really large coalitions had to spend much more time to coordinate with others. And so one thing I'll say is when you're looking to form a coalition or a partner group to work on your application, really try to balance the size of your group with your ability to be involved and to manage that group. And know that, while we are looking for groups that are comprehensive, we're not requiring a set number of partners, and it doesn't have to be a set size. What we're really looking for is a group that understands what they need to do and has some committed partners that will help make it happen. And that really leads me into what the next steps are for you to apply. We do require that the lead agency is either a municipality or a university that has a police department, since police involvement is such an integral part of this program. And we are looking for applications to be submitted by the end of the day on March 27th. So if you go to the website, you can download the application. It is an email-based application where you submit your entire application with your letters of support to Nancy Pullen-Sufert, who's on this call. And if you have any specific questions about that, you can ask us or you can visit that website for details. And the partners who have participated in the past will be accepted on a non-competitive basis, provided that an application is completed. If you haven't been involved in the past and you're a new partner, I wanted to lay out what our criteria are so you know how to make your application as competitive as possible. Because we are going to be limited by resources, and we are possibly not going to accept every application and from each community that applies. But we'll be looking for communities that really demonstrate an understanding of what this program is and have a strong sense of what their role is to participate. We'll be looking for a plan for participation, including how agencies are going to deliver pedestrian and bicycle safety messages to their community, how they're going to work with schools, if they have a plan for engaging the media. Just try to show us what partnerships and networks you have in place that you can leverage. And we do expect that these plans are a starting point, and you'll learn more along the way about what opportunities there may be. But we want to see some thought put into those. And also, if an agency has additional resources to leverage its effectiveness, if it can bring additional advertising opportunities, or certainly as has been doing routine law enforcement already and can show how they're building on things that are already out there, that's a bonus as well. It's not required, but it's something that we'll look for. So Lauren and Nancy, anything to add about the application process?
No. I think it may be worth pointing out that there's multiple folks who review the applications. We try to do that fairly quickly after the deadline is closed, and hopefully we'll be able to give responses to applicants by mid to late April about the next steps.
Yes, very good point. So Watch for Me has an executive steering committee made up of folks from NCDOT, from the Governor's Highway Safety Program, from UNC, and from other agencies. And we try to do a comprehensive and transparent review of all the applications that we get. And we hope to really have a good crop of new communities to announce as soon as possible so that we have plenty of months of lead time before the fall program really gets into high gear. So with that, we can open it up to questions if there are any other details or concerns that folks have about participating.
All right, yes, if you haven't already done so, please go ahead and type your question into the question box. With that said, the first question I got, in your opinion, what is the pedestrian's responsibility in ensuring their safety?
Well, with the Watch for Me program, some of the key messages that we try to deliver to pedestrians are to use the existing facilities, to use a marked crosswalk if it exists. We do have a RAC card that tries to make clear what the laws are in terms of where pedestrians should cross, how they should use the signals, where pedestrians don't have the right-of-way. And the law is a little bit nuanced, and so part of this effort is to really make clear what the pedestrians' responsibilities are. We also, on that RAC card, have references to what the bicyclist's responsibilities are for obeying traffic signals, for wearing a helmet if they're of a certain age, for using bike lights at night. And we try to relate all of the key safety behaviors to what the North Carolina law is and make that a little bit more clear. So it is definitely a program that aims to improve pedestrian safety behaviors, visibility at night, usage of the crosswalks and signals, as well as the other modes of traffic.
Okay, thank you. A lot of discussion is revolved around municipalities. What about counties' role in the program?
Definitely, I think the counties have an important role, and I can show the example from the Triangle community. The Capital Area MPO was involved in all of the Triangle community programs. They helped coordinate. They provided meeting space. They had materials that they distributed as well to their transportation committees and to some of their elected officials. So the MPO was really, I think, an important partner in terms of helping communicate the Watch for Me activities to all of the municipalities, some of whom were more involved in the program and some of them who weren't, and to the elected officials who were engaging with the MPO committees. In terms of other county partners, I would say many of the partners had the county sheriff or the county law enforcement represented, especially in some of the rural areas. The counties took a larger role. And Lauren, Nancy, do you have anything to add in terms of the role of the county and the MPO?
This is Lauren. I was going to add that in many cases last year especially, we had county staff, especially from groups like the health department, who were actually the project lead and the main point of contact. They coordinated, of course, with local law enforcement, but they, for instance, were able to receive the materials and help distribute the materials. So in many cases, they helped assemble the team and submit the application, and that was very successful in especially a few case areas. But the other thing I was going to highlight is at the police training, sheriffs and deputies are certainly eligible to attend those trainings. And we also involve State Highway Patrol. So in many cases, they were able to send officers to go to the trainings. because in some certain circumstances they can actually assist with the enforcement, and especially from the public education side of things. So there's definitely a place for those types of agencies to help out, especially when there's a need to address pedestrian and bicycle safety in more rural areas.
Good point.
And just to follow up or clarify, counties are eligible to apply for the application, and county sheriff's officers are eligible to participate as a partner in the program, correct?
Yes.
Great. My next question is, for existing or past partners, is there an abbreviated application for them to use?
The application is the same. Because each partner changes, each community changes its partnership mix every year. It changes its plan every year. We are asking them to go ahead and fill out the same application and to also provide letters of support. The difference for existing partners is that you won't, if you complete the application, you will definitely be admitted to the group of participants. You will definitely be accepted, whereas new partners may have to compete based on the resources that are available.
All right. Next question is, are there any funding opportunities or grants associated with the program?
This is Lauren. I'll answer that. Well, of course, we have to spend money and resources to procure the materials, the safety materials, the training services, and a lot of the media buys. We don't give money to the local partner to go purchase those materials. We do that on the local partner's behalf. And so there's not a financial grant as part of this per se, but what we do encourage folks to think about while they're doing their public education and enforcement outreach is to begin thinking about where physical improvements can really help make for a safer environment. So, participating in the campaign definitely gives you a better awareness about what your infrastructure needs are, and certainly a good way of identifying projects that you could submit, for example, to the DOT for a bicycle or pedestrian project, but there's not necessarily a connection between having participated in the campaign and securing funding for a project.
Okay. Next question. From whom should the letters of support come?
So that will depend on who your partners are, but I would say most communities had letters of support from their police chief, sometimes from their school district, very often from their local Safe Kids chapter, or their public health department, or the planning department that was working with them. Many communities had letters of support from bicycle advocacy groups that they were pledging to coordinate with. So it's really whoever you think that you're going to be working with, it's good for us to see that letter of support so that we know that they're aware of this and what their role may be, and it just shows a stronger partnership. But at a minimum, we expect that the law enforcement agency will provide a letter of support if they are not the one leading the application.
All right. My next question, are the materials going to be the same this year as they were in the last year, or will you be developing any new materials for distribution?
Yeah, this is Lauren. So the materials are going to look very much the same as last year. So to answer your question, with the exception of only one of the safety materials that we produced last year, everything will be the same. The bracelets that we produced last year were well received, but what we were hearing from folks is that they would also like a safety bracelet, a pedestrian reflective bracelet that better suits the needs of children. The bracelet was a little big for them, or the armband was a little big. So we're going to work towards creating a second arm or leg band that better fits kids. But everything else will stay the same. So the bumper stickers, the posters, and everything else will have the same look and feel as last year.
Will participants be able to purchase supplementary orders of the program materials?
Absolutely. They can certainly do that at any point. We had last year and the year before a couple folks who wanted to try to latch on to our procurement. Unfortunately, the way that we purchase materials, we can't very easily or really at all receive somebody else's money to go buy the materials as a bulk order. So what we really have to do is direct people to contact the vendor directly and purchase supplemental materials. And we'll be happy to do that after we've selected final vendors to share, who we worked with to develop those materials. And I know last year there were several communities who purchased, for example, additional bike lights, and that seemed to really work for them. And we wouldn't discourage anybody from doing that again this year.
Great. Next question is, how many new cities or universities do you expect to accept this year?
That's a good question. It sort of depends on the size of the communities that end up partnering with us this coming year. Of course, we commit to those who have been historic partners as long as they are able to submit the application and meet the requirements of the campaign. So we continue working with our former partners, and then we look to add new ones on top of that. So if there's lots of larger cities involved, that usually means that we don't have as many resources to spread over lots of communities. So it sort of depends on who the final applicants are and how big they are, because we try to give a fair amount to everybody, but we give more materials and material advertising in the larger urban markets, just given that they have a lot more population there. So it sort of depends on how many applicants, but we definitely have a fair amount of room to expand this year, so I wouldn't discourage anybody from applying.
So even if a town were a small rural town with about 1,600 people and only 2 major intersections, that would be a town that should still apply?
If they feel like this is a good fit for them, then they certainly can. And there's not a preference to work in large urban areas at all. So it's definitely a campaign that should work in a lot of different environments. But one thing that I think we learned last year is the more rural and small town environments sometimes struggle to figure out how to place the enforcement activities as part of the campaign in their communities. And anyway, so that's definitely something to think about, is if this is really the right kind of activity in those places where maybe you don't even have a lot of pedestrian activity, and then of course trying to figure out your enforcement events, that could be a struggle. But oftentimes in small towns, if they have a lot of tourism population, they can certainly have a lot of pedestrian activity. So it just sort of depends.
And I'll add on to that.
Just sort of add on to what Lauren said. In the application, be sure and articulate if you do have a lot of tourism, or it helps kind of tell that story about the pedestrian volume that you do have. Sorry, Laura.
Oh, no problem. One other thing I was going to say is if you feel like the requirements to participate are too much, if you are one of those really small communities with kind of lower staff capacity, all of the Watch For Me materials are available on the website for download. If you wanted to still use the materials but not participate in the full way. I don't want to discourage you from applying, because there are certainly a number of other benefits that you get from being involved. But at a minimum, I do want to make sure everybody knows that those materials are available.
Okay, following up on that a little bit, you'd mentioned tourism in your last comment. Some of the communities in North Carolina see a bigger spike in pedestrian traffic starting in mid-May and running through the summer, and then trailing off once the school year begins and when this campaign is really set up to go. Mm-hmm. What support can you provide to those communities who see more pedestrian activity during the summer?
Yeah, definitely that's an issue, especially in our coastal environments and then part of the western parts of the state for sure. I think what we're going to try to do a little better this year is try to get the materials out to those communities sooner and the officer trainings a little sooner in the season so that they can have those resources and try to conduct enforcement activities during the peak tourism season as much as possible. What we aren't able to supplant officer time, for example, similar to how other Governor's Highway initiatives work, but that's definitely a resource issue for small communities in those tourism regions, and something that they have to be mindful of. And I think in some cases those communities may have even applied separately to Governor's Highway for supplemental officer time to help with pedestrian issues. So that may be another place to look for additional resources to address when you have a lot more pedestrian traffic compared to your staffing level.
And Lauren, this year you think that the earliest we could likely have materials and training in place is early to mid-June, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. My next question is, do the communities with existing programs typically focus on one or both modes, bike or ped, in their program?
I would definitely say most of the communities took a pretty comprehensive approach looking at pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorists. If you're talking about law enforcement, we saw communities, because we had a lot of universities participate, they do a lot of direct outreach to pedestrians through foot patrols, and not all of that ends in a citation. A lot of it tended to be warnings and sometimes even positive reinforcement. Chapel Hill ran a program where they gave bike lights out and stuff in July to students when they were coming back onto campus. So it can focus on whatever you think the problem is in your community. If you see a lot of bicycle safety concerns, you might be focusing a little bit more on bike issues at certain spots. Other communities, we're seeing, really big problems of drivers speeding around schools, and they had children hit on the way to school. That was an example in Cary. And so they were focusing much more heavily on enforcing speeds and driver yielding around schools. So it'll vary, but I would say most of them tried to really approach safety from all the different traveler perspectives.
All right, next question. Does the program have any effort toward the design or layout of pedestrian and cycling facilities, such as standards and signalization? And if not, what other programs might be available for municipalities and counties looking to those issues?
That's a great question. So yeah, the campaign doesn't really address infrastructure issues. During the officer training, there's a very light touch on the relationship between engineering and enforcement, but we don't provide any, as part of this campaign, technical services about like the things that you just mentioned. But of course, at the local, regional, and state level, there are some places where you can go to find more, information about improving your built environment. We at NCDOT, through our mobility and safety program, and our division traffic engineers can help maybe look at some of the problem areas in your community to figure out if there's a good solution for improving safety. And then, there may be some specific safety programs that actually fund those improvements. So if you have specific questions about an improvement or a engineering safety concern in your community, I would certainly encourage you to reach out to your local division office NCDOT division office and see if they have some ideas.
Okay, great, thank you. The next question is, for communities that participated last year or in years prior, can they add additional members to or partners to their group application? For example, adding the county that was not part of the group before?
Absolutely, yeah. So the application can include new, more or fewer partners if you wanted to do that. I think we're looking for a sustained commitment from the core base of that partnership. So yeah, that's certainly an option.
All right, thank you. Do the range of printed materials reflect the specific name of the actual community in which the program is taking place, or are they more general safety statements?
Yeah, they're very general. So there's not any specific mention of the town or county or municipality on any of the printed materials, for example, or even any of the media purchases. So it's the same look and feel for any part of the state.
All right, thank you. The next question is, looking at the campaign materials distribution quantities chart, if our application includes the city and 2 colleges, would the materials distribution be additive? Therefore, that is, you get the city allotment plus each college's allotment, or would it be limited to the largest allotment?
It is additive. So if you're a county and a university and a city, each of the quantities for each of those partners would be added together to get your total amount. So yeah, good question.
All right, the next question is, what suggestions do you have for building a coalition in an area, and how could you find out if someone in your community has perhaps already applied to the program previously, maybe in years past?
Good question. Laura, do you have any? Laura and Nancy? Yeah.
I would say for the communities that have applied in years past, last year we were fortunate enough to accept everybody who applied. So if you didn't see your name on the list on the website, then you probably didn't apply last year. In terms of building a coalition for this year, I would definitely, again, I think it will depend on the size of your community, the capacity of your agency staff, and also what you're looking to accomplish with the program. But certainly, I think some key partners are the schools, law enforcement, public health, and the planning. And I think the communities that really got the word out best also had either somebody with their police department who was their public information officer, or somebody who handled human relations or communication with the city. Having that person with a communications background was really helpful to get their ideas on spreading the word more widely.
This is Nancy.
Nancy, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I guess I would also add to think about your potential school relationships, and if you or any of your prospective partners already have some links with the schools that can help you think about how you might focus some of your efforts in school zones, and also being able to build on messaging that would go directly to children and parents, then that would definitely be favorable. One way to do that, if you don't have any particular school contacts already, or even if you do, is to find out who your active routes to school coordinator is. So every part of the state is part of a region that is covered by an active routes to school coordinator, and I believe we have the no, maybe we don't. I was going to say we have the list of contacts there on the, but I think that's on the partner page. But you can also just do a Google search for active routes on the North Carolina Division of Public Health page and get a listing of the contacts that way.
Yeah, Nancy, I was going to ask a question. I kind of hear in that question that they just want to make sure that they're not duplicating each other's efforts. So is there a way that we can send out like a list of people who participated in the webinars to everybody else so they can see who participated? Or is there a way that we can give specific names? Because I could see, for instance, in Mecklenburg County, if there's multiple people, they certainly want to work together.
Yeah, we can certainly do that. And if you have questions and you want to email us afterwards, we can let you know who has registered for this or the upcoming webinar that may be from your community.
Yeah, okay.
All right, the next question is, in the case of a county wanting to participate, can it concentrate on a specific area, or does it have to be for the county at large?
Well, you certainly don't have to address the whole county if that's not your interest, and I can definitely see how you'd want to focus on certain areas. So you have the option of doing either. There's not a you don't have to submit a map, for example, of the part of a community that you would focus on. So just submit what you think would be the right fit.
Yeah, definitely. The other communities, a lot of them, especially when they're looking at enforcement, we work with them in the technical assistance piece to look at their crash data and help identify the places that may be the best suited for doing enforcement. And that, almost never is, county-wide or even city-wide, but it's a few targeted places. And if they're doing enforcement in a way that it's high visibility, sometimes they can convey the message to a lot more people across the county, even though they're really concentrating their efforts in a couple of key locations.
All right, the next question is, can we apply based on our daytime population rather than census resident count?
Daytime population. Trying to think about what that.
So for areas where they might have a lot of residents driving in from out of the area for tourism or work?
Yeah, I don't think so, because then that would make it kind of complicated for assessing everyone else's applications. But so yeah, I would certainly encourage you to, well, definitely just place the population per census, but there are several places in the application where you can explain some of the issues in your community. That would be a good place to talk about issue like a significant increase in daytime population, so that we can get a sense for what your problem areas are.
All right, the next question is, can you talk a little bit more about what the program encourages for law enforcement of pedestrian laws, and why anti-jaywalking isn't really a component of the program?
So and Lauren, feel free to jump in. So the reason that we say this isn't an anti-jaywalking campaign is we've had that come up before. We're not necessarily saying that you're not going to be approaching pedestrians with that problem, but we're saying it's not just that. It's bigger than that. It's looking at motorist compliance with yielding. It's looking at pedestrian compliance with signals. It's looking at bicycle compliance with laws. So it's bigger than just than jaywalking. The other reason that I mentioned that up front is because a lot of people in the past who were interested were a little bit, and we get this a lot when officers first come to the training, they don't want to pick on pedestrians or jaywalkers. They feel like they'll be slain in the media if they give a ticket to a pedestrian. And so we're not actually saying that we're promoting ticketing pedestrians, but what we're trying to do through the enforcement is to raise awareness through a number of ways. And every community will come about that with their own plan depending on what their needs are. We've seen in Greenville, for example, they developed their own ticket book for, not tickets, but warnings, and they've given thousands upon thousands now of warnings to drivers and to people who were, not exhibiting safety behaviors in crosswalks. And that can be just as effective as giving citations. And so, so we want, and this will really get into a lot more in the training course that we provide to officers, but we want them to know going in that we're not talking about picking on jaywalkers necessarily. It's part of a bigger program to raise awareness, and it may involve citations, but it may not.
I'll add, Laura, we do cover in the law enforcement training course that jaywalking laws in North Carolina are very, very narrowly defined, and that makes it a little bit difficult to enforce easily. So that's one of the other issues with jaywalking.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, this is the last question I have, so if you have any more questions, please go ahead and send them now. But the last question I've received so far is, should NCDOT be more involved in the design and construction of pedestrian cycling facilities and not be solely the responsibility of the city, after all, these facilities are intended for transportation?
This is Lauren. So I'm not 100% sure I'm following what your question is, but NCDOT, of course, does get involved in design and implementation of improvements for bicycle and pedestrian transportation. So the Watch for Me campaign is just one of many different things that we do to try to improve bicycle and pedestrian safety.
Yeah, the Watch for Me program is really kind of emphasizing the education and the enforcement components and how those may coordinate with infrastructure improvements. So it's really about complementing other infrastructure programs, but that's not the biggest focus of the Watch for Me program.
Okay, well, those are all the questions I've received.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for your time and having such good questions. We're really excited to continue expanding the program. And if you think of any other questions, my email is there on the screen, and Lauren's as well, if you want to do any more follow-up before you submit an application. But we are certainly excited to work with you and others on into the future, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.